Welcome to American Black Journal. I'm Stephen Henderson. There's been a lot of debate over the violent and deadly demonstration by white supremacists in Charlottesville, Virginia. President Trump was pretty harshly criticized for his response to the violence, and since then, we've seen more white nationalists plan rallies in various cities to promote hatred and bigotry. So, how does the nation move forward? Joining me now to tackle that question is social and civil rights activist Reverend Horace Sheffield III. Welcome back.
Thank you, Stephen.
Black
yes,
Journal.
my pleasure.
So that word healing, I think that means something different to lots of different people. And I think one of the problems that we have with incidents like this is that people want to use that word instead of justice.
Sure.
And I think the relationship between those two things is one of the things we got to work on, right?
Well, you know, I thought a lot about what I was going to say today, and I think the genesis of this is rooted in what I call white male anxiety, the sense that this country belongs to a certain group of people. And when President Obama was elected, we know that folks on the Hill met the very day of inauguration to thwart his progress.
And this is only going to go on for 4 years.
No question.
Right?
And things that they were for, they were now against. Things they were against, they were now for. And so the lack of civility that we saw with respect to people in the actual House during the State of Union addresses, calling the president out, has led to where we are now. I mean, Trump is the personification and accumulation of some of the racist sentiment.
The backlash.
No question. And so I think we've gone further backwards because at least there was a larger degree of tolerance. And some of what we've seen was subliminal and subterranean. Now it's mainstream, and it's frightening.
And so what do you do to, I mean, my instinct is always to say, all right, well, that's what they believe, that's what they're saying, but there's got to be a way to break through that to get us all to be able to at least talk about the things. And you know, we're talking about a lot about white anger. Let's talk about black anger as well.
And I think that that's an appropriate conversation to have, because I don't think that Donald Trump nor some of these white racists and supremacists understand that it's a different day. We don't have a Dr. King around. And I've told some of my white friends who've expressed that if you believe that, go on Mac and Bewick without police protection and make sure you wear your white sheet and see whether you really believe what you believe to the point of being willing to die. But yeah, that's an issue that people have to be aware of, is that it is engendering and causing comparable response on the other side. But what's heartening to me, when you look at the counter-protests and the people who've organized against all of this, the younger population of white Americans and others who've grown up with a culture of diversity now see this as antithetical to the America that they want to see occur. And so that's heartening, because I think the other folks are definitely in the minority, but it doesn't take a lot of folks to wreak havoc.
We saw what happened in Charlottesville, but as I point out, there's stuff happening all over the place. I don't feel like we're dealing with quite the same issues here in Southeast Michigan. It's not that kind of thing, but we have our own. Well,
I mean, we've had a history here, you know, restrictive covenants. The Women's Club on Ferry and Brush had to close up the front door and open the side door. You know, I remember stress, and I remember, you know, the whole notion of who's Detroit, which was being discussed when African Americans were moving here and forced to live in certain neighborhoods. So, you know, we've gotten past the more visible manifestations of racism.
We don't have guys marching around with torches.
Obviously, though, some of this stuff was very deep-rooted and right beneath the surface for Trump or anyone else to be able to bring it to the fore. I again say what we're dealing with here is whose country this is. And that conversation, as you know, by these white supremacists and Breitbart and all them, believe it to be theirs.
And they're afraid that it's changing. I mean,
well, white males are going to be the minority very, very soon. And so I say white male anxiety. And white men are even willing to sacrifice the progress and rights of women. It doesn't matter to them. They just want this to be their country. I never forget, I went to the inauguration first time for President Obama. I was one of the early supporters of him. And I saw T-shirts that says, for real, a black man in the White House. I mean,
at the inauguration.
At the inauguration. So we've got a long way to go. You're right, in Detroit, you know, with the majority population and some of the progress has been made along the lines of civil rights. We don't have the brutality issue.
We don't.
In large, we don't. If it is, it's based on class, but not on race.
Right.
We're really lucky to be where we are.
Yeah. What should the pushback against what we saw in Charlottesville look like? I have found myself in recent weeks saying, all right, let's get a bunch of African-American men together, 300 or 400 of them, and march around with torches and say, aggressive things. I mean, that's sort of how you feel. And then you think, well,
but the reality is, Steve, let's be honest, if men of color did that, they'd be arrested.
We couldn't do it.
I mean, the passive posture of the police in Charlottesville would never be the case if they were black men walking around with torches. The fire department would have been there with hoses.
But so then that leaves us with that question.
It leaves us with having, number one, to mobilize from the bottom up. We got too many people who don't vote. I mean, we're dealing with a backlash that's based on someone who was elected. With 15% of the population that votes and the vast majority who doesn't. Jim Farmer, who was a good friend of my dad's, came to TOC when I was about 10 years of age, and he made this statement. He said, politics is the most mundane art, who gets what and how much. And anyone who does not want to vote or be involved in politics wants someone else to decide what they don't have.
That's right.
I never forgot that. I was elected at 21 years of age. And I still think that's true. And people who get on talk radio, and I'm a talk radio host, and they express themselves. I mean, half these people aren't even voting. Let's really vote. True. Let's get people to the polls. And we can turn these folks out who are turning other folks on.
Speaking of voting, one of the things I feel like we also have to do is fight the pushback against voting, which is these sort of ridiculous ID requirements and stuff, with efforts to make sure people have what they need to do. I mean, let's have an ID drive in places like.
And the mechanics of voting is very important. But what's frightened me in this last election was African Americans denouncing Hillary Clinton and telling people they ought not vote. Now where are those folks? There was no difference, right? Right. I mean, maybe we ought to send the white supremacists to find them with some lanterns. Right. I mean, we have to vote. We have to make certain that people have access to the ballot. We have to make it easier, not harder. And there are places around the country that does that. I mean, there are places you can vote besides just election day. Right. Let's make this a real democratic process, and hopefully we'll wind up not only with political democracy, but economic democracy as well.
All right. Reverend Horace Sheffield III, always good to talk with you.
My pleasure, man. You come from a great family. I know your people.
So do you. I know yours. That's right.